This is Fans on the Run, a podcast made by, for, and about Beatles fans. And now, here's your host, Alexanian.
All right, welcome back to Fans on the Run, the Beatles podcast which has eliminated the need for all other Beatles podcasts. There's nowhere to go but down from here, he said knowingly. So, as we record this right now, we're in a very interesting time. I was going to make some sort of, grandiose statement about how we should keep sane and, stay together, but this is not the show you go to hear that, because I don't know how to speak. My friends call me borderline illiterate, so, go read a book. I don't know. Anyways, enough of my... I feel like I have to meet a quota every episode. There has to be at least 45 seconds of delusional rambling at the start of the show before he actually makes any progress of some sort. But I digress. We have a fantastic guest for you today. And as a musician and as a general tech nerd, musician tech, learning about all the gear, I am really, really excited to delve into this. He's a musician, producer, arranger, and audio wizard of both the analog and digital domain. He's the author of the Beatles Recording Reference Manuals, of which there were 4. Volume 1 is My Bonnie through Beatles for Sale, Volume 2 is Help through Revolver, Volume 3 is Pepper through Magical Mystery Tour, and Volume 4 is the White Album through Yellow Submarine. There were but 4 volumes. However, a new day has dawned, and the saga has finally come to a close with the final volume, volume number 5, which covers Let It Be, or the Get Back sessions, through Abbey Road. Please give a very, very, very warm Fans on the Run welcome to Jerry Hammack. Welcome to the show!
Oh, thank you, Ethan. It's great to be here with you. I really appreciate that.
See, this is one of the benefits of doing an audio-only podcast, but while also having the video on. Because I could see during my my monologue there.
I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
I was enjoying it thoroughly.
Yeah. I have an audience. I work well with an audience.
You do.
So, Jerry, how have you been holding up?
I've been holding up well. Getting Volume 5 ready to go out the door it's time-consuming and mind-consuming, but it's coming together. It's in the very final stages, and hopefully within a couple of weeks it'll start to be available to get into people's hands. So that's always an exciting time when you're in the publishing cycle.
Actually, do you have a release date?
I'm looking at the second week of November 2020. Yeah.
Okay, so
just a couple weeks away from our date today.
Yeah, by the time this episode goes out, the book is already available to buy. You can go to.
Let's future trip. The book's out there. Pick it up today.
Yeah. Well, we'll do all the extensive plugging at the end. I give my guests free reign to plug whatever the fuck they want.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I did say the fuck word because this is a forward-thinking podcast.
Okay. Well, yeah, we're not gonna censor you, so no worries about that.
I'm the one who edits it, so who's gonna censor me? Who's gonna censor me?
There you go.
So, I was about to ask a stupid question. I was gonna say, how's the weather in Toronto? And then I realized, Ethan, you could look out your window and see pretty much the same thing.
It's so true. Nice to be doing one of these with a Canadian.
Yeah.
As we were talking before the broadcast started, it's rare to have a Canadian to Canadian discussion about these things unless you've got Piers Hemmingson in the mix.
Yeah. See episode 5 with Piers Hemmingson for more. Hi, Piers. But you know what? It's I feel like I feel like I've ascended to a place as one of the token Canadians in this Beatle world.
Absolutely, and welcome to it.
Yeah, I'm very happy with my position. So, well, for those who don't know, I'm gonna shake up the format a little here. Holy, oh, what the? Okay, here's what I'm gonna do. Why don't you tell people, if in case they've been living under a rock or are just stupid, what the Beatles Recording Reference Manuals are?
Sure, it's a multi-book series. There will be 5 volumes by the time this is out, and it covers their entire catalog of released and recorded music. So everything from My Bonnie out through the Abbey Road sessions at the end of their career. It takes you on. It takes you through the recording of their music from first take to final remix is sort of the easiest way to think about it. So when they go in to record the songs, they start with a backing track, and then they'll do overdubs to build the song. I walk you through every step of the way to tell you how each song came together and the decisions that they were making along the way to bring the songs together. And as a reference manual, then it also includes information on every day in the studio, who was there, what the instruments were, who was playing what studio gear was in play for it, and then what was accomplished in terms of recording or mixing. Beyond that, as a reference manual, I went deep, over 10 years of research into this matter, in this subject, and where there is a conflict in historic record about what exactly happened in the session, I bring that out and as best possible help to settle issues where there is a disagreement between other Beatle authorities on what happened in the session and what got done and how the songs came forward. These are not storybooks. They're not books that try to tell you what was going on in John's head when he was on acid during the Pepper period and went up on the roof in the middle of a recording session. That's not what I'm interested in or what the books cover. I leave that to better authors than myself. It really is a reference manual to help you understand how their songs were recorded, how their entire canon of music was recorded.
So, to kick things off, I have a really nerdy question, a very specific question.
So, I hope I have a specific answer.
Yeah. Well, I think you might. So, I'll kind of spoil it. My favorite Beatles album is Revolver, and my favorite Beatle guitar tone is All Over Revolver, with like Taxman and Your Bird Can Sing. You know what I mean? That kind of slightly... But I've never been able to recreate that sound.
Well,
what were they doing?
Well, they were still using, and for the majority of their career, actually, they used the box amplifiers, like the AC30 amplifiers, was what they were using.
Yeah.
The guitar of choice primarily was a for the solo work. So Taxman is McCartney playing the solo, he was playing
the Casino, right?
Yeah, the Epiphone Casino, a semi-hollow body electric guitar. So there's not a whole lot more to it than that. You're overdriving an amplifier, overdriving a twin 12 amplifier is essentially what it is. They were recording their amplifier cabinets either with the Neumann U48 microphones or with the Neumann KM56 microphones. But there's not a lot of magic to that. It's simply a guitar. It's a guitar amp combination, and then like any guitar player does, you play with the tone knob, right? The red consoles that they were working with had very limited ability for sculpting of the equalization profiles of any signal going into them. So they essentially had what you might think of on your home stereo as a treble and a bass control. Not a whole lot else, so that the Beatles had access to other tools like what was called a curve bender EQ, the RS56. So the key to those tones is a slightly overdriven Vox amplifier and a semi-hollow body guitar. That's it.
because I had seen some conflict on the nerd forums about, like, they've settled that it's a Vox, but none of them can decide whether it's an AC30 or one of them solid state ones, the UL 730, I think it's called.
The ULs weren't in the UL. The UL 430 and 730 weren't really in play quite yet, and those were experimental models. So those weren't in play yet, and but demonstrably they were using the AC30s on a consistent basis, where they did have, and the exact numbers are escaping me. I want to say it's like a 7130, which was another model that was kind of in play in that era, and that's certainly a possibility. And I'll tell you, from the way that I handle these questions in the books, is if it's absolutely known, we have photographic evidence of that session. And the session that let's say we're talking about the Taxman session for the solo, or Andrew Birkinson for the work there, and we know that it's in Studio X, and we have a picture of them in Studio X, and we can look and see that these cabinets are mic'd up and it's these amplifiers. Then I will say it's these amplifiers. But if we don't know that, then all we can know is that they had a certain range of amplifiers that were available to them. And my discussions with Ken Scott about this topic indicated that they would often start in one direction. Let's say they've started and they've mic'd up the AC30s and they're going after Taxman, and they decide, it's not quite happening. I wonder what this sound like on the UL, or the, I think it's the 71 or the 7130 box. What would that sound like? And they plug in, and that's cool. Quickly they move a microphone and they do the work. So we don't know those things. We can't possibly know all of that. So I never pretend to know what you can't know. I get you as close as I can get you to what we do know for sure. And beyond that, I give you the range of possibility that we know, we also know for sure was in play. Beyond that, it's people who will tell you, for instance, I can tell the difference between, a single wound coil and a humbucker any day of the week. And I'm like, well, maybe you can. I know as an engineer that sometimes you can't. So there you go.
I know more than I did 3 minutes ago.
Good.
Yeah, because that guitar tone is just, again, going from talking about all these fancy pieces of equipment, and all I can say is just, oh man, that tone is just so bitchin'.
Well, that's what it comes down to, and I think it's always what it comes down to when you're making music is what sounds cool. What do you think sounds cool?
And the Beatles were the masters of using the studio to sound cool.
Absolutely. They gained a lot of freedom through their success to try different things in the studios. They had freedom that most artists didn't have at the time, and relatively few artists are allowed in their career. And it was because they sold a lot of records, and no one was going to say that you can't have that magic in a bottle. Whatever that was, the powers that be at EMI were gonna let that happen.
Well, I'm gonna take a bit of a side turn from that and go right back to the beginning and ask Jerry Hammack, how did you first discover the Beatles?
Oh my gosh. The
question's serious when my voice gets low.
Oh, that's all right. Okay, well, I'll follow you down and tell you in another very serious voice. It goes back to my earliest days. I'm a child of the '60s, and so I was brought up on the Beatles. They were into their career when I was a child, and there are pictures of me with my brothers standing on the mantle of our fireplace at my grandmother's house with tennis rackets, pretending we're the Beatles. in the U.S. where I grew up, the Beatles' second album was on constant rotation
I was
in
gonna
my
ask,
house.
what was the first Beatle record you remember getting?
Beatles' second album was the first one that really drilled itself into my head. I think the first one that I owned that was mine was Pepper. But
Now, the important
all of that
question,
music.
was that mono or stereo?
Oh, it was stereo. It was stereo. There was no, knowledge of the difference, the fundamental difference for the average consumer back in the 60s. I mean, if you were enlightened, you might know these things, but for the vast majority of consumers, what Capitol Records put out in the U.S., those were the Beatle albums. That weren't those the Beatle albums?
Yeah.
That's what we knew them as.
Rubber Soul starts with "I've Just Seen a Face." Is there another way?
Rubber Soul in the U.S. is a country album, right? Rubber Soul in the U.K., the Beatles' actual version of Rubber Soul is something completely different. And I grew up with those experiences. I grew up with the experience of Rubber Soul's a folk rock album, for lack of a better term.
See, I've got a bit of a unique perspective, not even just as like a kid who's grown up with the, canon British catalog, but it's like my first Beatles CDs I owned was that 2004 the Capitol albums box set. Okay. So my first exposure to those early songs were through those, duophonic Dave Dexter Jr. mixes.
Yeah, the dexterized, lots of reverb, and but again, he was doing what he knew through his experience at Capitol in the U.S. Sold records in the U.S. That's what he was doing. Now, later on, when we get exposed to what was going on with the UK releases, and in my life, it was when I was an early teen, I was able to start getting my hands on imports from the UK and from Europe. Yeah, imports. They would, imagine that of the actual, the Parlophone records, and like, wow, the track listings are different. That's unusual, and they're so much clearer, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, and then you start reading about them, get more deeply interested in reading about the Beatles' history, and you realize, oh, Capitol was repackaging everything. Capitol was doing X, Y, and Z to sell more records in the U.S. Oh, okay, I get it. And now, don't forget, the Beatles were aware of this. There's an interview with Harrison where I think he's talking about Beatles 65.
Is that the one where it was at the press conference for Help at the Capitol Records Tower, and they
I couldn't tell you specifically, any of that kind of stuff, but I do recall he was talking about the fact that he knew that Capitol was reconfiguring the music, and it would come out in a different way. That was going to be on, something like Beatles 65. And, he knew that they were, taking help and making Yesterday and Today. He knew that they were carving things up to get more releases out of it. I think in the U.S. they only average 10 songs an album compared to 12 to 14 songs an album with the UK releases. And the Beatles were aware of that, and they didn't care because they were selling records.
Yeah. You can have all the artistic integrity you want, but when you're selling, millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of records, then, you'll just take the check.
Well, yeah, after a point, I mean, you've made the music. There are the versions that they loved and wanted the public to hear. They made those. Those were always going to be there. It's sort of the same thing, now with what Giles Martin's doing with the remixes. Those are kind of those are cool for completists, and they allow you to get a different view of the Beatles' music. But it's not the original stuff. As again, I think it was Ken Scott, as Ken Scott was saying, or someone was saying, if you want to hear the original ones, they're there.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not anything to get too, too fussed up about.
On that kind of note, I want to ask, what are your thoughts on the new not Glyn Johns, Giles Martin mixes? Let It Be is on the brain.
That's okay. It's been on my brain too. I appreciate the Martin mixes, the Giles Martin mixes, for what they are. They are certainly bringing a new level of fidelity, where we can hear more fully what was going on in the recordings that were made, because he's able, to reverse engineer the sessions and get access to the tapes and the tracks in a way that the Beatles never had the opportunity to. That's all cool. And as a completist, which I am, I've got in my collection is well over 5,000 different Beatles tracks, and versions of the songs, tapes of the songs, mixes of the songs. So I mean, I love all that. I love being able to hear everything that's there. I appreciate it that way, but I never confuse what Giles Martin has done I've never confused it in the way of thinking about it as mixes that the Beatles would have done if they could have done them. I don't think you can put a contemporary filter on what the Beatles did in the 60s. All art, music included, is a product of its time and its limitations. The Beatles music sounds the way it does because of the era that it was made in and the technical limitations that they had in creating it. You can't separate the two. So Martin gives us thoroughly modern mixes, and if the Beatles were working today, as you see McCartney's still working today and Ringo's still working today, their approach to the music, given modern technology, the same music, would be very different, and we would have a very different result. We don't know what that result is, but it's not what Martin has done.
Oh, I'll give my 2 cents on how I've felt about the remixes over the past few years. With the last two, the Abbey Road and the White Album, I didn't really I did a lot of A/B comparisons. It's some stuff on the new box I prefer, but it's not that different. Well, as you get out later in their catalog, and starting, the White Album, about half the album was done on 8-track. So when you get out into the 8-track recordings, now what's on the tapes that Martin has access to, is pretty much the same thing that the Beatles had access to. So there's going to be a very close analog. When you get to Abbey Road, you're almost virtually what he has to work with is the only thing to work with. It's not like when he was doing Pepper, where a lot of the Pepper tracks are made up of audio that's coming from 3 different reels of tape. By the time they do the tape reductions to get, to work within that 4-track format, they had to do multiple what are called tape reduction remixes, meaning I filled up the tape. They bounce down.
Yeah, they bounce down for a more colloquial term for that. Because he had access to earlier generations pre-bounce down, he could give us a different view into the songs. But what's available for Abbey Road, there's only a couple of instances where there were a tape reduction remix in the Abbey Road, where they went from tape to tape. Typically, it was an internal bounce down, meaning of my 8 tracks that I'm working with. Let's say I fill up 6, I got 2 open tracks. I would take 3 or 4 or even 5 tracks, and I could move them to 1. Well, the reason I do that is now I'm going to record over everything else, so it's gone. So what Martin is left with is pretty much what the Beatles were left with when they were working with them, what Martin and Emmerich were left with when they were working with them. So it's not surprising that as you get later in their catalog, these remixes, at best, sound very close to the originals.
However, I will say this again, I've said it before, my preferred listening experience for Sgt. Pepper in stereo is the 2017 Giles Martin remix. Because I have never been a big fan of the original stereo mix. Frankly, for years I could barely listen to the 60s British stereo mixes in headphones because it would just be like all the voices in one ear and then like a tambourine and then everything else. And then yeah. And
Rubber Soul was mixed that way for stereo. Rubber Soul is one of those albums where, it's built for karaoke.
Yeah.
You can
just unplug one of the speakers.
Unplug one of the speakers and start singing along. Absolutely.
But I am a big fan of what he managed to do because it sounds full. They kept using like this like buzz phrase, like trying to make a stereo version of the mono mix.
Yeah. So, think about that for a second. What are they doing with that when they're saying that? What are they saying? And I believe they're saying that when the Beatles got to the stereo mix with Pepper that we're talking about here, the stereo mix has always got the short end of the stick.
Yeah.
Up till the White Album. The White Album was kind of mixed in stereo and mono pretty much simultaneously, so there wasn't a lot lost in translation. But with there was some, but not a lot.
Yeah.
With Pepper, there are really glaring differences. The use of ADT to create a flanging effect on Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, like these phasing vocals that you don't hear. It's straight ADT on the stereo one. It's not, the phasing and flanging are not going on in that track at all. Mm-hmm. So that they were trying to recreate that, that's wonderful. The problem the problem I have with it, I don't know if it's a problem, but the biggest difference that I notice in it is Martin has a very modern approach that you can't get away from. And what that is being able to hear everything. So with modern recording engineering and mix engineering, one of the things that a lot of engineers grow up learning now is that, you need to be able to hear everything. You need to be able to hear the guitar and hear the bass and hear the drums and hear them all the time. What that ends up giving you is a very leveled experience. Yes, you can hear everything. I can hear all the articulations of the instruments. That's great at one level. But the Beatles in that era and the engineers in that era didn't mix like that. They picked things to come into your attention, and they came glaringly into your attention.
That's the one aspect of the 2017 mix that I am not a fan of. Like if you listen to like The End of a Day in the Life on the original mix, it's just a sonic brick wall. You don't know what's going on. There's just sounds and sounds and sounds. But now you're able to pick out, there's a cello, there's a violin, instead of just being bombarded.
There was nothing polite about that climax. There was and it was not supposed to be polite. It was supposed to explode. And so when you give up explosion for articulation, then you get what Martin did. I can hear everything, but it doesn't move me. Right? Yeah. The original mix moves you. It overwhelms you. And Martin's mix is, wow, that orchestra did a nice, whatever I'm not classically trained. I couldn't tell you what they were doing in that technically that roll up is called. But, that sounds very nice. Look, you can hear that one of the tracks are going down and not up. Oh, that's cool. I like that. That wasn't the intent. The intent was chaos and explosion and climax, and you don't get it.
But two tracks from that, we'll move on from this in a minute, but two tracks that I kind of feel benefited from being able to hear much more. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is, I think, the best the song has ever sounded.
Yeah.
It's...
I will not argue taste with anybody.
Yeah.
And, I think, again, what
my favorite stereo mix of the song.
Yeah, for a lot of people, a lot of fans who have not been exposed to the Beatles, Martin's work has acted as a gateway, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's a very positive thing. I think like most fans, when you start to get excited about music and you learn a little bit of something, and it triggers your imagination, it triggers your curiosity, and you start digging in. So it's absolutely of no harm that Martin might be people's first Giles Martin's work might be people's first exposure to the Beatles, and it can certainly lead them into the original work and an understanding of the original work, and it's all good. It's all good.
Luckily, my favorite version of Pepper is still the original mono. It's...
Yeah, now, and full disclosure, I didn't hear the original mono stuff until, I was probably in my 20s. It just wasn't on the radar. It wasn't on the radar. You got stereo, and when I was a teenager, they were trying to popularize quadraphonic sound. When you got that going on, you're like,
I still occasionally see I keep seeing like quad copies of like Dark Side of the Moon or like some Genesis album.
Quadrophenia
there
in
you
quad.
Go. But then I came so close to buying those, and then I realized, well, shit, I don't have a quad setup.
Yeah, you need a quad setup.
Yeah, I don't think my cartridge can handle quad.
Well, no, it's a tape format, as I recall. It's a open reel tape format is quad.
Well, there's quadraphonic records.
Well, that's news to me. Maybe it's news to me. I just don't recall anymore. It was such a small. It's sort of like people going, "Did you see that on Laserdisc?" It's like Laserdisc. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I knew it existed, but no, I didn't know that there were quadraphonic records and Is there quadraphonic records? I'm not sure I'm following you there.
There are.
But
there were actually a few Beatles related ones.
Quadraphonic.
Yeah, there was a John
vinyl.
Imagine was released.
How was that engineered? I have no idea. That's odd.
There was a quad Imagine that came out in '71, and I think there were some quads for like Goodnight Vienna.
Can't you hear like the keystrokes of people like now Googling quad vinyl?
Yeah.
To try to see which one of us is right and which one of us is getting too old. Probably me.
Again, I don't own them because they're really expensive.
Yeah, what's the point?
Yeah. I even read that like someone had the tape box for like the master tapes of Pepper, and there was written in there like September 1972 quad mix. That
Interesting.
In the 70s Pepper was apparently mixed for quad but just never released.
Interesting. Yeah, so for people that are curious about that kind of thing and how it relates to the work that I've done, I kept my scope of work, because it was so huge to start with, I kept it very clear and very clean. I've only been interested in documenting the Beatles recording work in the course of their career, in the course of their recording career as the Beatles. So I didn't get into, any of the greatest hits packages and how those might have come together, alternative mixes for those, or any of that kind of thing. My work starts with 61 when they were doing the work in Germany. It ends with Abbey Road, or Let It Be. Sorry, I Me Mine, the very last thing that they worked on. That's it. That's the scope of it. So was there, a Pepper quadraphonic vinyl mix made? No, I didn't follow the rabbit hole that far down. I needed to come up after a decade.
Well,
and to come up out of it.
The question here isn't like, was there a quadraphonic mix made? It's, who gives a shit? Yeah.
Well, some people at the time probably did. And probably.
Well, I don't think anyone cares now.
If it happened.
There's a 5.1 mix that you can buy.
For sure.
Yeah.
The Blu-ray versions. And now, there's another thing. Again, extending the Beatles catalog in different ways that people can experience it in different ways. That's all. That's all cool. There's it's all good. But someone who's interested in history, that has its place in the timeline of history. But my interest is really on how they made the music they made. As a musician and a producer and an engineer, it's how did they make that music? That's what fascinates me. It isn't what happened afterwards to address different marketing opportunities that might come. That is virtually no interest to me.
Well, I want to go back to kind of your origin story here. What do the Beatles mean to you?
Oh, everything. I mean, the Beatles are one of the primary reasons I got into music in the first place. So, yeah, they're fundamental to my understanding of music. I mean, they're the yardstick that good music is judged by, as far as I'm concerned. Good pop music is judged by.
How did they influence your career?
I knew very early on that the Beatles were doing, I'm talking like 7 or 8 years old, that this music was made in the studio, that this music was made on a multi-track. And I knew this very early on. And from, when I really became aware of the Beatles, they weren't playing live anymore. They were studio band, right? They were doing everything in the studio. So I knew that here were these great, cool musicians, and they were making music in the studio, and they were making multi-track recordings. And I have, or my mom somewhere in a box has drawings that I made mapping out, much like are in my books now, multi-track sessions for my own music, where I would dream of making these songs, and they'd have a guitar on track 1 and drums on track 2 and vocals on, and I knew probably by 10 years old about things like bounce down mixes. I had learned about those kinds of things. So I was like, oh, I filled up the tape here. I'm drawing my diagrams. I filled up the tape on my imaginary song. And so now I've got to send all of that to this so I can open up to do. All of this was in my head, and it was because of my fascination with how the Beatles made their music, and wanting to make music, and realizing that was in reach for me, and that was all because of the Beatles.
So, like, in your daily work as a producer, how often do you like feel a Beatles influence when you're making like mixing choices?
Oh, it's ingrained. I mean, it's absolutely ingrained with me. It's part of my core philosophy when I'm working is to work with intent, work with the idea of commitment, make choices and stick with them, and realize that the choices that you're making now are going to influence the shape of the song as it moves forward. When I really started getting experience and exposure in professional studios, it was in the late 70s, and that was an era where you started to hear people saying things like, "Oh, we'll just fix it in the mix, man. Don't worry about it." You'd hear that kind of talk going on, and that was never what you were able to do, typically able to do, or necessarily the right thing to do when you're working with tape, and especially when you're working with a limited number of tracks on your audio tape. What you're forced to do with a limited number of tracks is you have to make choices that are committed to. So when the Beatles did these reduction remixes, they're working on let's move them past the twin track days into the 4-track days, starting with A Hard Day's Night. When you're going to run out of tape, or you've run out of tape, I've filled up all 4 tracks. I've got my backing track with my backing band. I've got a couple of things of harmonies, but wouldn't it be cool if we had a horn section? And now I've got to open up a track to do that. In order to move those 4 performances to a new tape, you have to make a mix. You have to mix it in order for those 4 tracks to take up only 3 tracks or only 2 tracks. And right at that moment, you're committing to decisions like, how am I going to EQ this? How am I going to compress it? What instruments are going together on track 1 or track 2? You're making all of these choices that will shape the way the song sounds from there on out. And that's influenced me. I think of the creation process as additive. It's always additive when you're making music in my way of thinking. So I never look at I'll just put down a piano part and then we have the luxury nowadays, as you know, working with virtual instruments and MIDI, that we can track like a piano part on one of 100 pianos and be done with the core composition of the part. And then we could endlessly go back and go, I'd like to try that on an upright piano that has soft felts, and I'd like to try that on a Steinway 9-foot concert grand at the Royal Albert Hall. I'd like to hear that in grandma's spinet piano in the basement. And you can make those choices going forward if you choose to. I don't work that way. I figure out what I want to hear, I track it, and I commit to it, and then move forward. And I work with artists that way. Because now I can forget about the past. The past is done. It's only the future. It's only what's ahead of me now. And you could spend endless amount of hours going back and back and circling around decisions. So what I've learned from the Beatles and what I take into recording every single day and producing and mixing every single day is make a choice, move forward, get the work done.
Now I'd like to do a little experiment. So I have a friend. His name's Dylan. He does not share all of my same opinions on the Beatles. He doesn't understand. I keep trying to tell him, you do not realize how much they innovated, not even just that in the studio, their studio innovations. I'm going to pass it to you, Jerry. In your opinion, what were the top 5 biggest innovations that the Beatles did in the studio?
Well, I don't know if I would be naming 5 of them.
Okay,
certainly
3.
Well, let's just see what comes out of my head.
Okay.
Certainly the use of artificial double tracking.
Well, that was created in Abbey Road.
Yeah, it was created in Abbey Road by Ken Townsend. So artificial
I almost
double
said
tracking
Ken Scott, but I got confused with the Kens.
So that's a big one. The extensive use of Barry speed on tracks to do all sorts of things in creating mood with music. The use of alternative sound, for lack of a better term, that would be exampled by using the Leslie organ cabinets as guitar amplifiers. There's one.
Man, that is, I think, my favorite sound on the planet. Just a guitar through a Leslie.
Yeah, well, it can be nice and it can be horrible, but but it's there. the experimental use of tape loops in pop music. Here's something to remember about the Beatles was they had the eyes of the world upon them. Right, once Beatlemania hit, once they captured the popular imagination, they had the eyes of the world on them. So here's a band with the eyes of the world on them that are willing to do things like Revolution Number 9. Tomorrow Never Knows. Tomorrow Never Knows is where this all started, where the extensive use of loops all started. But step out a bit, and here is a band that's willing to do that. It's willing to experiment,
and a band that's willing to fight EMI to do it.
Yeah. Again, it's not my bailiwick or in my memory. Like, how big of a fight was that? Lennon wanted that as a single, I think.
No, I mean in general, there was a constant struggle.
Well, there's always. I mean, all a record company wants to do is sell records, and the easiest record to sell is the one that you've already sold, right? I know, hey, give us some more yeah stuff, you guys. That sold a lot.
I remember hearing a story of they were mixing, or they were like recording, I think it was Taxman, and Ringo asked the studio technician to move the mic closer to his drum, and he got fined. EMI had very, very rigorous standards for recording, which is why a lot of the majority of the catalog coming out of EMI sounds magnificent. So they had rules like you couldn't use ribbon mics. And in the Beatles' case, a popular ribbon mic in their era, the early era, was a STC 4038 ribbon mic, and that early on was used for kick drum. But it's a ribbon. Ribbons are very, very fragile microphones. Well, there came a point where it was like, no, we're blowing up way too. They can't take sound pressure levels, and kick drums put out a lot of sound pressure. Because they have a very fine foil that vibrates, is the way the technology works. So EMI comes down and says, hey, no more rhythm mics or ribbon mics on kick drums. We're blowing up way too many of them. We can't do that. We need them for other purposes in the studio. Well, that's fine, but the Beatles could still use ribbon mics. The Beatles were like, no, I like the way the ribbon mic that sounds on it, so we're going to use it. And that's sort of an example. Now, where they did run into some, I mean, they were always up against the administration in that way of EMI, that Paul wanted more bass signal than EMI was giving him, and so they would kind of like nudge the mastering engineer, hey, can you give me 2 more dB on the bass? Well, I don't know if this story's true. I think I've already said that. When they were recording the guitar parts to Revolution, DI into the mixing console, they had an Abbey Road intern shove a chair against the door so no one else could get in until the Beatles had laid it down.
Yeah, I don't know about that. It could be a cool story, but it's true. Maybe it's true.
Yeah.
What I do know about that was when they finished that and they were bringing it into the powers that be as a single to be released, and they're listening to it. Sir Joseph
Lockwood.
Yeah, and they're bringing it into to listen to. That the reaction, my understanding of the reaction was, you can't release that. It's all distorted, and it is. Everything on that track, almost everything on that track is distorted. From the vocal, guitars, bass, and drums, they all have an edge of saturation or heavy distortion.
The only thing that doesn't sound,
you can't put that out.
The only thing that doesn't sound really distorted is the keyboards.
Yeah, that's a good point. But certainly what they were going for was this hyper compressed, super saturated sound. So there you go. And you might hear in the background, sorry listeners, oh, the alarm's gone off. Someone's car was not stolen, apparently.
You heard it here first. This is a Fans on the Run exclusive.
Yeah, yeah. The crime spree in downtown Toronto.
I gotta love the GTA.
Yeah.
So, now I want to get kind of opinionated, because this is when the show gets really fun, and this is where all the fun conversations happen. What is your... What?
I'm following you.
Okay. You're following what I'm putting down?
Yeah, we'll see how far.
Yeah. Don't follow me too far, you might walk off the ledge.
Okay.
What is your favorite Beatles song?
Oh, yeah. Different songs on different days. I can tell you, I go back, in my heart, I always go back to With the Beatles, to the With the Beatles album. There's something about that just feels right. There's, as far as performances that like always come to mind, Babies in Black from Beatles for Sale. I'll never forget hearing that on a really good stereo system for the first time, and hearing the "Oh How Long Will It Take" harmony kick in, and just getting goosebumps. So there's that. When I was growing up, Magical Mystery Tour was being played nonstop by my brother and I, the U.S. version of Magical Mystery Tour. So the album. So there's that going on. It's definitely different tracks at different times, but I do come back to With the Beatles, I think, for a couple of reasons. It's not as raw as Please Please Me, but it still has the immediacy of the band as a live act. And I've always loved that about the Beatles. When the Star Club recordings came out in the mid '70s, and the album version of that opens, so not probably a lot of people nowadays have experienced that more through bootlegs than they have through the vinyl and the original release that came out on who knows what record label, I forget now.
It was like Linga song, or
there you go. That's great. Great memory. Yeah.
It was something.
Yeah,
like
I think that's it. I think that's right. But it opens up with "I want to sit right down and cry over you." I'm going to sit right down and cry over you, and just blew my doors off. And this is coming out. What's really cool about it, as far as like when that came out, I believe it was 1977. Yeah. And so this is happening when punk is starting to really come into the consciousness of the U.S. market. And now here's the Beatles as a punk band. Here's the Beatles that are just raw and on fire, and they're doing these. They're just, these are rapid fire, on speed sets that these guys were doing in Germany, and to hear the Beatles that amped up and loose and raw, but still hear the Beatles. It was just cool and eye-opening. So that's another one that
I really love
kind of
the
the
Star Club
visceral experience. That's one of them.
I really enjoy, even though they're really lo-fi, I really enjoy listening to the Star Club stuff.
This is a thing that I think it's. I'm an audiophile.
Yeah.
I love great sounding music. I love as close to what the artist recorded as I can possibly get. Whatever that is, I want to get that close. Like I'm always, when I'm listening to music, it's always very neutral. It's always, I think of it. I hate an experience that is colored too much by a reproduction system, a stereo system. I don't like, I don't like hyper bass. Like I would be a very I'd be a very unpopular young man today because I would not have the car with the booming bass going on, with an 18-inch woofer in the trunk to give me that, that low-end rumble. No, I don't want to hear that. I want to hear what the engineer did. I want to hear the way that they put that music together in the studio, as close as I can. So, that's my preference. But however you hear the music, given the era, I'm open to it. Like I've got a huge collection of a digitized collection that I got from a U.S. university of wax cylinder recordings.
Oh.
And they are, they're it's, this is what the Richie band and the city of the I love that crap. I love it. I absolutely love it. It transports me. I love that. I love 40s music. And this is stuff because of the technology of the era that it has, it's got, by today's standard, very limited bandwidth. It neither has the high frequency reach that's possible nowadays or the low frequency reach. That doesn't matter. What matters is that it connects with you emotionally, and so that's always what I'm after with the music. So the Beatles of different eras, some people describe the Beatlemania Beatles as like black and white Beatles, and the Beatles after the Pepper era as color Beatles. And I just don't think of it that way. I just think of it like, I take what I take what I'm given. I understand because I do the work that there are limitations that come with it. Yeah. And I recognize that the work that I'm doing now, I work completely in the box on computers and I have the world at my fingertips. But I realize the world at my fingertips right now in about 10 years is going to seem primitive. And the sounds that I'm able to generate now are going to seem primitive. But they're of their time. The work that I'm doing is of its time, and that's the way that the filter that I used to view the Beatles work. It was of its time, and for that, it's phenomenal.
Well, the flip side to the question of what your favorite Beatles song is, what's your least favorite Beatles song?
Probably like the most indulgent ones, probably, and these might be fan favorites. Things like, what's the new Mary Jane,
okay.
Or 12-bar original. It's just terrible. They're just terrible. They're fun. 12-bar original isn't even fun. So maybe that's it. 12-bar original. Let's put it at that. The Beatles were not great at jamming. Just not a great jam band.
No.
But it's those sorts of things that that are in their canon that they could get away with because they were the Beatles. But there's not a whole lot of thought put into them. There's those are the ones that just again, they don't resonate with me. That's all I'm ever looking for. I'm just looking for something that moves me, and those don't. I'll get a kick out of, like Mary Jane. Get a kick out of what's the other one from that period. It's escaping me. But
my name, look up the number.
Yeah, my name. It's it's terrible.
Well, I don't think it's terrible. It's just fun.
Well, it's okay. It's okay, but it's okay on the fun scale.
Well,
but I think it's just terrible.
They made it. It's about the quality of their Christmas records. Except for
Christmas Time Is Here Again, which is a great Beatles track.
It is.
As repetitive as it is, it's absolutely a fundamental Beatles track.
Yeah.
Just and
which
and
I think it's a travesty that it's not available anywhere, except for that Christmas singles box that came out a couple years ago. Or if you want to go back in time to 1995 or 1996 and get your little CD single of "Free as a Bird."
Well, there you go. It's out there, but that I want to say that's like acoustic guitar, piano, drums, and vocals, and that's all it is. And yet, that's the Beatles. Mm-hmm. It just sounds like the Beatles, right?
Yeah.
It's unmistakable. Yeah, I love that. So there's a very slight effort, right? They probably came up with it on the cuff, as they did, most of those Christmas records. That one was actually, I take it back. I think the song was probably more off the cuff, but the skit that they did, the silly little skit they did, they had a plan for that pantomime Everywhere is Christmas or something that it's part of.
It's part of my every year
that
Christmas tradition. I put on all the singles.
That's funny. The Christmas ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're a riot.
I had not been so excited about an official Beatles release in a long time, and then they announced the Christmas stuff, and I about shit my pants when I saw that.
Yes.
Like, finally! It's like Apple knows who their market is. They know it's weirdos like us who will buy, the Beatles talking like, thank you for buying a Fun Club record.
Yeah, well, there's certainly an aspect of the community that is again completist. They want to have or they want to hear everything they can hear.
Oh, I sure as hell am one of them.
Great. Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. I mean, it's certainly informative to when you're able to go deep into their catalog and deep into their, like I've been able to do, into their sessions and understand how the work came together. And there's musical innovation and moments that are happening all throughout it that they're entertaining and they're enlightening as far as from a musical standpoint. One of the big things I always talk about when I'm doing these kind of discussions is how practiced the band was. Mm-hmm. And I think it's lost on a lot of fans just how hard the Beatles worked at making music. The only real exposure we have to it, big exposure we have to it, is through Let It Be, which you're saying is on your mind a lot these days because we're all waiting for the recut of the movie or Peter Jackson's version of the movie and
the Disney
whatever they're going to do.
And,
well, hopefully it's not Disney-fied, but we'll see. Well, I guess we'll have to see. But the tapes that came out of that. The Twickenham rehearsal sessions. There are bootlegs of that. It ends up being about an 80 CD collection.
When I was talking with Bruce Spicer a while back, he told me he had the full because he had done this Get Back book, and so he'd listened to the whole thing.
Oh yeah, I've got it, and the same story as Bruce. But what you learn from that is how hard the band worked on a daily basis to get ready to make a record. And that's exceptional. They weren't savants that just went in and like, Beatles, John, give me Strawberry Fields. Boom, Strawberry Fields. No, it didn't work that way.
No.
It didn't even work that way with two of us. Give me two of us. Relatively simple tune. You learn through the Nagra reels of those Twickenham rehearsal sessions for What It Be, that in any one day they might do 40 takes of two of us over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, working out just small details as they learn the track of the arrangement, how they want to sing it, how they want to play it. Maybe try some variations on the different sections. They were working. And this is at the end of their career, toward the end of their career. It was no different at any point in their career. This is a band that worked really, really hard to do the work. Now, was it always, day after day after day after day of rehearsals? No. But they didn't just plug in and come up with magic. They worked their butts off to bring that to life, and we're the beneficiaries of that really hard work.
I've got one last question. Well, not one
Sure.
last. I've got two. What is, in your opinion, the best sounding Beatles album? Not your favorite, not your one you enjoy the most.
Easily Abbey Road has the best fidelity of any of the Beatles albums. Abbey Road can stand up to anything recorded today for the most part. It's that good. It's that well done. So hands down, it's Abbey Road. It was conceived and recorded in stereo, so it's very modern. It was never a mono version of it. It was never intended that way. So it was always recorded. It was always recorded and intended to be heard in this full, broad image that we commonly experience music in nowadays. Yeah, it's easily the best sounding of the Beatles records.
And not a non-Beatles question, what, in your opinion, is the best sounding album that you've ever heard?
That's a tough question. The best sounding album that I've ever heard.
And again, it has nothing to do with the quality of the music, but...
Yeah, that's just super difficult for me. There's so many recordings of phenomenal fidelity, from classic rock bands to experimental artists, to artists that you had never heard of today. There's stuff that Brian Eno did that was just fantastic. Daniel Lanois, Canadian, his Gold Top recording that he did is just a beautiful sounding recording. So when you talk about that, to me that starts to speak of these layers of intricacy that can come into the recording process, or immediacy that comes into it. So almost impossible for me to answer like what's the best sounding thing I've ever heard. A lot of the big records of the mid 70s where they were getting everything right on the technical end, Steely Dan records that were like going on then. Asia. Just hard to find fault in anything that was going on then. However, Asia, because it was recorded in the era that it was recorded, it's got a shelf. It's got a low-end shelf and it's got a high-end shelf that are very different from the expanded sonic ranges of things that are going on now, where you can record information that we can't hear. Right? You can record frequencies that we can't hear. Human hearing goes from 20 hertz to 20,000 kilohertz on average, but you can track stuff down to 15 hertz, 5 hertz below what we can hear. You can track stuff up to 40 hertz, 20 hertz above, 20 kilohertz above what we can hear. Dog hearing territory. So you can track these things, and they certainly have an effect on our perception of fidelity when we're hearing modern recordings. And so even these great classic recordings that were being made, they don't have that range available to them. Every year there continues to be great music made. Every year there are engineers and producers that are pushing the envelope. It's exciting. It's fun to learn new things, and the technology now that's available for you and I to make great music, produce release quality music, means that great sounding tracks, great sounding albums, great sounding singles are. They're in everyone's hands, and you have the patience and the dedication to make that kind of music.
And I just want to round out our conversation with this. Why do you think the Beatles still matter?
Well, the Beatles still matter because they created music that was both accessible and meaningful, and personally meaningful as well as culturally meaningful. So that sort of thing will always matter. They also set a bar for musicians that is still yet to be surpassed. And I'm not talking about just popular sales. I'm not talking about just the fact that they remain one of the top selling artists almost every year they're in the running for the top selling artist. They're just, that's just crazy to think about 50 years on, that they're able to chart, and that they are competitive in streaming marketplaces and all of these things. So it's not only that. It's they established in the mindset of especially musicians that are trying to create music, the idea that I can do this. I don't need a songwriter. I don't need a studio band like the Beach Boys had, the Wrecking Crew. We can do all this ourselves, guys. We can, guys and girls, we can make music. That's why they still matter. There's still an example that these, a fairly modestly talented band out of a very small, northern England town can come in and rule the world of pop music. That gives everyone hope. It's a great story.
It is a great story.
And it's a story that you and I can embrace wherever we are in the world. Can embrace that the Beatles gave me permission. The Beatles gave me permission to be a rock star if I want to work hard enough. I can try to work hard enough. And they gave me permission to make my own music, and they gave me permission to have my own communication with my fans. They did so many things on those levels. I think that's really why they still matter. The other aspect of it, why they matter, why they are such a great example, is in a very compressed creative period of time, just a few years.
Yeah.
They put their head down and banged out some of the best music of all time.
It was 62 to 69, and they did that.
Yeah. I mean, part of it was what they were called on to do under their contract. That was just the nature of the industry at the time, that they had to keep up that level of productivity. But it's the productivity plus the quality that makes the difference with the Beatles. It wasn't just that they were coming out with a couple albums and a couple of singles a year for years and years and years up to Pepper. It was that of themselves, under George Martin's guidance, of themselves, they demanded that music be cool, that music be good, they demanded that of themselves. They didn't let themselves get away with doing crap. And I think that's, again, that's why they matter. That's for anyone who's involved in making music, is a lesson you should take from it, is don't allow yourself to make crap. Take the time to do whatever expression that you're bringing into the world as your art. Take the time to make it right. Take the time to do the best job you can do on it. Because I'll tell you the other lesson that I've learned over my career is you don't get to go back. And the Beatles didn't either. You never get to go back.
Yeah.
So don't make music today thinking, I'll do a better job on this recording, next year. I'll do it again. Because I guarantee you will not do it again. Today is your moment with the art that you're making and the music you're making. So make it today the best thing that you can make today, and you'll thank yourself down the road that you took that time and put in that effort.
And so, now it brings me to my favorite part of the show, where I got to turn it over to you. Where can we find your books?
Amazon everywhere is probably the easiest way to find my books. You can get them through
It's obviously on Amazon to everyone except me. Now I just feel like a fucking idiot.
That's okay.
Now I have some catching up to do, because now I have to buy 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Well,
number 5 I'll put on my Christmas list.
There you go. That's a great. Makes a great gift.
Makes a great gift.
As Spinal Tap said, makes a great gift, isn't it?
Yeah.
Amazon in almost every major market, globally, it's available. And if you want to buy it through the website and learn a little bit more about the books before you buy them, Beatles Recording Reference Manuals.com is the URL for that. I encourage people to get the books if you're, a music nerd, a tech nerd like me, a Beatles nerd like me, and you think you've found something in the books that maybe the books, or you feel like you know something about the Beatles that will make the books better, or just want to share, there's contact information on the website. Please reach out. I don't take offense at people finding out that I'm not perfect. The feedback I've got from readers and from fans has helped make these books better, and I really appreciate it. And I'm going to make you track down chapter and verse if you want to get anywhere with me, mind you. So there's the caveat and the warning is bring your A game. But
cage match.
Yeah, but bringing good information to light that. I can't possibly have everything right all the time with these things. There's things come up, or there are documents that have been lost that I don't have access to that someone else might. Anything like that you might think would help make the books better and more accurate. I'm open to. There's contact information on the website. Again, it's Beatles Recording Reference Manuals.com, and I welcome it and I appreciate it.
Well, I've had a very fun time today.
Oh, me too, Ethan. It's a blast.
Yeah.
Blast talking to you.
It's thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And to everyone else out there, thank you for listening. You can go home now.
Bands on the Run is produced by Ethan Alexanian. Additional voiceovers by Richard Phillip. This has been a Showtown production.